I find you really need failure to get better. And it actually gives me more inner strength to recognize that what I'm setting out to do is not a waste of time. There is value to it, and that we just need to figure out how to put all the right pieces together. I have as many naysayers. It can't be done. You're out of your mind. I don't think that ever goes away.
Right.
And I would think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you just need to recognize it's noise.
It's noise. Welcome, badass entrepreneurs. It's time to hear the world's movers, shakers, and difference makers spill their secrets for unlimited success. So strap in, for Badass Entrepreneurs Only begins now. Hi, I'm Coach Dan Gordon, and I am beyond pumped to be interviewing automotive entrepreneur Steve Saleen. As a certified car geek, I can't wait to talk to him about how he built one of the most successful high-performance sports car companies on the planet. If anyone has some great success secrets, it's Steve Saleen. Steve's humble beginnings in the car business started in 1969 by entering and winning local races all around Southern California. Over the next decade, he was setting new records at race car tracks all over the country. In 1983, he birthed Saleen Automotive, launching his own Saleen Mustang, a revamped, high-performance version of the stock Ford vehicle. People fell in love with it. Steve became not only a master mechanic, but also a master of marketing. He rented himself out for national ads. These ads made Saleen a brand name in the high-performance world and caught the eye of McDonald's, who made one of his cars the grand prize in their Monopoly game. Saleen cars can be seen in Hollywood blockbuster movies like Transformers, Iron Man, and of course, Fast and Furious. He has even recently debuted his new version of a Tesla, which he calls the 416. Saleen has transformed the way high-performance cars are built, marketed, and introduced to the public. He has certainly earned his reputation as an automotive business legend. Steve M. Saleen, welcome, welcome, welcome to Badass Entrepreneurs Only.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So I want to take you back to 1983. When you launched Saleen Autosport, did you have a vision that one day this would be your life?
Not exactly. No, it was when I grew up in Southern California, graduated from USC. I wanted to be a race car driver. So I didn't have any money. I lived at home, worked on it, and to make my first race was quite an ordeal in the respect that I built the engine and in my parents' garage at night. And
now there was no YouTube. Like, how did you learn how to build an engine?
You just do it. I don't. It's just you do it. You always say to yourself, well, how hard can that be? We kind of joke about that, and then we always find out how hard it really is to do it.
And I just want to point out something right there, because that is part of your genius and your success, right? Most people would say it's too hard. And instead you say, well, how hard could it possibly be?
Yes.
Like, it's got, like, other people figured it out. I got to be able to figure it out, right?
I think that's really, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, that trait is important to kind of understand, is that but you can joke about it. You don't, because you know you are going to fail. And actually, I would say that you have to fail. And as you were saying, you have to fail a lot of times on this. Every failure makes you better.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the more you fail, the better you will actually get.
Did you get into Mustangs just because you happened to have a Mustang as your first car? Like,
no,
if you'd gotten a Camaro, would have been all...
Well, my first car was actually a Porsche. It was a 56 Porsche. I wanted to get a 911S, and I started to save for it. And I realized, wow, it's going to take too long. So I said, well, you know what? The Mustang would be a good second choice. So that's really how I kind of got into Mustang. And then I wanted to go racing. So I built the engine in my parents' house. And the first engine I built lasted, I would say, 2 or 3 seconds.
I was thinking like
literally
50,000 miles.
No, literally. As soon as we turned it over, it froze.
Oh boy!
And that's because we didn't have the right clearance. I didn't understand the relationship of the clearance that the bearings needed to have to the crankshaft.
And so right there, did you feel a sense of discouragement, anger? Did you say, oh, screw this? What kept you going, that's interesting. Let me keep trying.
That's actually a very good question. Well, again, it didn't surprise me that it wouldn't work right because I'm sitting there kind of learning on the fly. So I wasn't really totally discouraged with it. Yeah, frustrated and go, yeah, this costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had to save up to get the new parts to put into it. And then we rebuilt it, and I thought, okay, I learned that aspect of it. And so then the second time we start the engine up, it lasted a little bit longer. It lasted, I would say, for maybe 15 minutes. And then realized I had a lot of black smoke coming out of the tailpipes of the engine.
So you knew what the result was that you didn't want, and you knew why you were getting those results. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say, yeah. So we were trial and error and experimenting and running that. This wasn't the end all. That it's just the basic obstacles that are right in front of you that you just need to figure out how to get around this particular aspect of the development cycle. And then the third time is that I wasn't actually able even to start it. And it was like, wow, I cannot believe that I can go through this level of the complexity of building an engine.
Right. It's not like you saw a pie and said, I want to make that same pie.
Yes.
You were like inventing a new kind of pie.
Yes.
So did you say to yourself, I want to be successful in the car business? Or was it like just a passion? Not just, but was it a passion that led you to it?
Yes, I think you have to have a passion to start with and an inclination. You have to have some aptitude in the general respect that you believe that you can do this or you can participate in this field.
So did you say to yourself, I think I can be good at this?
Yes.
So it's interesting to me that very early you had a sense of, I can be good at this thing, right? Like not everybody can do this thing that I can do.
Yes, but recognize the engine building was a requirement to get where I really wanted to go, and that was driving race cars. And so it was like a necessary evil, but I had to conquer first so I could even get to the part of where I wanted to drive the race cars.
And how old were you at this point?
Well, I was late teens.
It's so fortunate that you had that sense of yourself at that early age. Very few people do. So in 1973, in Riverside, California, you entered your very first race ever, and you won. Were you surprised that you won?
I should have, yes. I should have quit then.
Why?
Well, because how are you going to improve on that, okay? But no, I was hooked. And it was, a lot of it, though, I think had to do with the trials and tribulations to get to the first race. That was not easy. Just physically getting the car and the engine running so I could compete in the first race after failure, I think, unbeknown at the time, actually prepared me better to have a more positive outcome on my first race. But obviously that exceeded my wildest projection on doing that.
You were training yourself about how to handle the emotional difficulties with the failure of the engine. You're doing this over and over again, sort of the wax on, wax off thing of the Karate Kid. Like without realizing it, you were becoming an expert at managing your own feelings when it came to failure and success. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say that is key in understanding. You do have to have a lot of persistence and determination. I would say if you ask for traits, persistence would be, without a doubt, one of the things that you just have to keep at it. And you recognize that you are not going to be successful initially, but you need to get out in the stream of life and actually start doing things. And then stuff starts opening for you that you didn't even see initially, but because you're in the stream physically doing things, opportunity presents itself.
Yeah. Was there any point where you thought, I don't know about this. This isn't working. Maybe I should find something else?
No, I would say that racing and automobiles are very expensive.
Yeah.
So the financial aspect of getting race cars to track or building automobile companies and all of that, that is by far a daunting task.
And what is it about racing that was so appealing to you?
I wasn't interested in drag racing. you work just as hard on the car, and you are driving the car for maybe 8 seconds, and then the race is over.
Yeah.
The NASCAR oval racing is you're just going in circles all the time, but road racing, that appealed to me because it requires skill sets on acceleration, braking, cornering left, cornering right, up hills, down hills, and it's a more all-around type of discipline that I've always admired and wanted to pursue.
I thought maybe your distaste of drag racing happened in 1974 when you lost a drag race because you forgot that you had 1,200 pounds of dog food sitting in your car. How did that happen?
I would say that, Dan, you've done very good research on, I was against El Camino, and I'm sure I could have taken him until I blew the clutch as soon as the light turned green. I was doing a delivery for my dad. I grew up in the pet industry. He started Nutro Dog Food Company.
No kidding.
Yes.
Oh, so entrepreneurialism was in your blood.
Yeah, so I was delivering dog food at the time.
Okay. So this wasn't like a sanctioned race. It was just at a stoplight.
No, I could have beat that El Camino. I can guarantee you.
And so, but I got to ask this. What was more disheartening, the dog food thing or driving off the cliff at Turnbull Canyon?
Thank you for bringing that up, too. Well, the Turnbull Canyon was, I felt, again, that I was ready to go racing.
Yeah.
And this is one thing I did learn. This is the only accident I've ever had so far on the street. So, but that really taught me a lesson. And again, that shows if you're driving performance cars, you need to really be paying attention, and speed will kill you, literally. And I was actually very fortunate, and I will say I really learned. Again, if another point, if it doesn't kill you, you really should learn from it.
So then in 83, you launched Saleen Autosport. How did you decide to take this huge risk and start your company?
I don't probably view it as major risks if I can work within myself and look at the different gates that you have to go through. And the opportunity that I saw, again, I had a lot of self-belief. I felt by doing a special edition vehicle, there was an opportunity here. And that opportunity would create income that would then be able to sponsor my racing. And so, again, I was more focused, and very similar to what Enzo Ferrari actually looked at, is that the car company that he did was strictly to support the racing habit. And initially, that's where I was looking. It was I had to get to spend the money in racing. I needed to have financial and success, and by doing special edition vehicles, I saw an opportunity that I could use my skill sets, that I could actually take the revenue from there and put it into racing.
That's really interesting. I was thinking, all right, maybe Dad's kind of like the night manager at Wendy's or something, and the family's scraping by. Like, you guys are doing well. But it doesn't sound like he was funding this enterprise of yours.
No, my dad, actually, he was very discouraging. He said he wanted me to follow in his footsteps with all of that, and I wanted to be a race car driver. But he said, real people are not race car drivers. So
well, someone has to be, right?
And after I won the first race, and then I graduated in Formula cars, my parents were not keen on me doing it, and I kind of had to hide that fact that I was out racing until I did really well. One race up in Canada, and because I would fly out on Friday into at the race event, do Saturday, Sunday, late Sunday night, get a flight back, and then be at work the next day. But on this particular day, I did really well up at a race up in Canada with a Formula car. And if you wouldn't know it, that luck would have it that the LA Times picked up the story that they had a Southern California guy winning the race up in Canada. And so at breakfast that morning, my mom says, "Is this you?" And so then at that point in time, I said, "Yeah, well, you've been racing we didn't think you were. You just said you were going away for the weekend or whatever." That was an interesting aspect that I kind of had to come clean at the point in time.
You kind of came out of the racing closet. So here you are. Your parents, clearly your father had the means to support you. And not only did he didn't say, look, if you're going to do this, you're going to do it on your own. He actively said, don't do it.
Yes.
And there's that persistence. There's that determination, right? And so, like, you didn't know that you'd end up being this successful, right? In the moment, you don't know which way it's going to go. And you're thinking, wow, the people in my life are really against this. Shouldn't I be listening to these? Like, your dad's really smart. He's very successful. And yet you didn't listen to him and you followed your passion. Isn't that hard?
Again, that's a very good question. And I would say at the time, yeah, it was, I recognized that if this was going to happen, it would be entirely on me. And I'm the one that has to make the decisions, and I'm the one that has to make it happen. I'm not going to be able to have anyone else hand it to you. And I think, again, that's kind of an important aspect that as an entrepreneur, you need to recognize that, yeah, you can blame everyone around you and all of that. I find, oh, it's Joe's fault, or it's just, but at the end of the day, well, who hired Joe?
Yeah.
Okay, and who actually did this, and who actually put the culture in place, and all of that. And it usually comes back to one person, and that's where you need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and go, yeah, okay, so let's learn from that and then move on.
Did you ever come to a point with any struggles, I mean, because I'm sure there were times where it just looked like there was just a wall that you're like, I wonder how we're going to get past this.
Well, I think that's daily. I mean, which year do you want to talk about? I mean, we have gone through wall after wall on this. I've been accused of having 9 or 10 lives like a cat, and how people will come on this. I have been said that laid for dead, and on the side of the road, but you figure out a way to regroup and regather. And again, from my standpoint, I find that as you survive more of these, again, is you really need failure to get better. And it actually gives me more inner strength, I guess, to recognize that what I'm setting out to do is not a waste of time. There is value to it, and that we just need to figure out how to put all the right pieces together.
And this is great, Steve, because these are things that you can't just Google and like, okay, that's how to do it. It's really slogging through. And so I want to keep jumping ahead, because it seems like the 80s is where things really started to take off for your company. You started setting records at racetracks. You got introduced to Ford executives who just were in love with your Mustang. Your team wins first, second, and third place at the grueling 24 Hours of Le Mans, and that hadn't happened in 20 years. And so it seems like you use this star power to start making a name for yourself in advertising. I mean, was that a strategy? Was like, okay, now I'm getting on the map a little bit with all this. Let me get out in ads so I can get my name out there more.
Short answer would be yes. I built the first street car in conjunction with our first race car. Okay, and we debuted that together at a racetrack up in Sonoma, California, at Sears Point Raceway. This is 1984.
Okay.
And because, again, I wanted to race, but I needed the street cars, so I showed both cars on the pace lap. We haven't even started the darn race yet. Okay.
I don't like where this is going.
On the pace lap, a Corvette loses control of his car. He climbed the guardrail and it launched him, and he came down on top of my car. So my race was over before we started. And there was a lot of money tied up in the race car and the street car. But this is where life gives sometimes a juncture. And I didn't have enough funds to fix the race car in any time soon. So my focus had to go more on the street car endeavor. I realized because the exposure I had at the event with the street car was overwhelming. So that's where I put a lot more energy into the streetcar building and thinking about becoming more of an automobile manufacturer.
Wow. One of my favorite things, which is you went to where your potential customers are, you turned around, you looked at your business from their perspective. What do they want? Well, they want to feel like they're race car drivers, right? So just like you repainting your Mustang, they want to have this cool high performance car that they can pull into their garage.
Actually, it's interesting that you bring that up. If we want our sales and marketing people, when they visit the dealerships to not look at it from our perspective.
Right.
Look at it from how the consumer looks at the product and be able to analyze that of how our product is perceived in real world.
It's what they want.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's not what I want.
No, right. No one cares about you. They only care about the part of the product that they love.
Yes, actually, that's very well said.
And so what's the part of your product that people love?
Well, I think with the automobile, most people fall in love first with the looks, the aesthetics of the vehicle, and then it is a matter of once they get in and drive it, it's how it makes them feel. And that is what is important, is why the leathers and the suedes that we use on our steering wheel are so important. Because what do you touch? The steering wheel. And it's the seating that's the first part. But it's also how it accelerates, how it decelerates, how it goes around a corner. Even though we're moving into electric vehicles that don't make a lot of noise, but it has been the sound of the engine. We're building cars for people that actually like to drive and enjoy driving.
With all of your cars is like the acid test. Like, can it haul 1,200 pounds of dog food? Is that?
Yeah, well, our trucks now easily can do that, okay? So we're doing all of that.
I just want to touch on the advertising thing just for a moment. Was that the idea, like, whoa, I can really get out there and really get my face and name out there? Was that part of that? Or was it like, okay, this can fund more racing?
No, from my standpoint, if you're going to build high-performance vehicles, ultimately you have to show it's a high-performance vehicle.
Yes.
So racing is more of proof of product concept.
And so in 1994, you introduced the 480 horsepower Saleen SR Mustang, which is a crazy amount of power. Were you just challenging yourself to see how powerful you could make a car?
Yeah, I don't think you can have too much horsepower. And so we certainly are always pushing the envelope. And we want to do it safely, and we want to do it so it can be repeatable, but it's about speed.
Yeah. Then in 96, you went the opposite way. You created the S281, which instead of 480 horsepower, it's 220, cut it in half, but you made it more affordable. And then you also partnered with Budget Rent-A-Car, so people could rent one of these cars, kind of almost like a try before you buy. Were you worried about devaluing your brand? Because to me, it sounds like Rolex watch coming out with a cheaper version of a Rolex.
Actually, that's a really good question. And certainly we look at, from our standpoint, is the key element isn't necessarily the horsepower number. It is looking at the performance of the vehicle. And so if I reduce the horsepower on this, but I can reduce the weight, there's power to weight ratio, and everything else puts it in the supercar category at a very affordable price. You need to not lose your identity, but you need to develop product that people will be able to have at the price points that make sense.
And I love what you said about the experience, right? Like, people don't just buy the car because it's a fast car. They buy it because they like the experience.
Yes.
And I don't think entrepreneurs think about that nearly enough. I don't think they think nearly enough about the sellability of whatever they're selling. Right? They just want to focus on the cool thing that they love. In 1999, you start to work on a car that's codenamed Project Molly. And Project Molly would become the S7 supercar. 427 cubic inch V8, turbocharged, 6-speed manual tranny, 550 horsepower, and capable of reaching speeds at 200 miles an hour. You win at Laguna. It wins the GTO Driver Championship. You qualify for pole position at Le Mans, and it sets a track record and finishes third. Right? It literally is a supercar. How did you go from, hey, I have an idea, let's do this Project Molly thing, to creating this?
Well, first of all, to sell the new vehicle off of a dealership showroom in the U.S., it has to meet all of the requirements that General Motors or Ford Motor Company meet. And the way that we were looking at it is that I had taken the Mustang as far as I could take it, not just in the U.S., but we went to Europe. And there I got beat a fair amount in the races over in Europe against the European style car. McLaren F1 was at some of these events, and I'm going, wow, even though we had the Super Mustang and it was a successful race car, it was not of the caliber that if I was going to do international, that I was going to win. And so that was the gestation of recognizing that, wow, we could actually compete against these, but I need to change the whole architecture of the way that we're doing it. And so that was
Tom, because this is really important. You have all this success throughout the 80s and 90s, and then you go to Europe and you get your ass handed to you. What is the emotional process? Is it like, have we gone as far as we can go? Are we, headed down the dark road here? I mean, how do you come back from that?
Well, you realize that you're not going to compete on a global stage, and you figure out, okay, but there's elements that we do better. And you go, so how do I utilize those elements that we do better against all of these other competitors?
Yeah.
And those are some of the foundations that you realize, wow, we can actually do this. And so in our case, in building the first American supercar with the Saleen S7, that I realized aerodynamics now was really starting to play a much bigger role in vehicle dynamics. So I go, well, how do I learn the best aerodynamics? And at the time, and actually it still is today, is Formula One has the best aerodynamics and spends the most time and energy in doing that. So I went over to Europe and we hired aerodynamicists from the Williams Formula One team to talk to us about doing that. And then we developed the car actually in England, which is the heart of Formula One on this. And I couldn't afford a lot to do it the way they do it now, but the University of Scotland in Glasgow, on this, I could get on their wind tunnel and I could spend hours and days developing the aerodynamics, and I had college students giving us a lot of feedback in addition to our own engineering staff that I could get things done pretty quickly and pretty economically in a very short period of time that we would do that.
So I love deconstructing this process. You're like, okay, who are the smart people? All right, here are these aerodynamicists, right? We're going to talk with them. How do we do this inexpensively, right? College students. You're still struggling with the same thing. Like when you were building that engine in your garage, it's expensive, right? It's just that the expenses have gotten much, much higher, but you're still dealing with it.
Yes.
And so you're looking at things strategically about, here's the objective. Here's all the things that we have to do to achieve the objective, or all the things I need. How do I make those things happen? And it just seems, Steve, like there's something in you that says, okay, we can do this. We may not know how, but let's begin. Is that fair?
Yes. Again, this gets back into how hard can it be?
By now, haven't you figured out, like, okay, it can be really hard?
It is unbelievably hard.
Yes.
And if a person in their right mind on this deal, most people say you wouldn't even attempt to do it.
Yeah.
You would not attempt to do it.
Aren't people throughout your career like waving you off? Like, okay, no, not this one. Like the other one's fine, but not this.
Yeah, actually, that's true no matter what you do. I find today's environment is no different than the beginning. I have as many naysayers on the things that we want to do. It can't be done. You're out of your mind or whatever, as I did at the beginning of time. I don't think that ever goes away.
Right.
And I would think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you just need to recognize it's noise.
It's noise. It's great.
When we first went with our Mustangs, when we showed up at the track and there was a bunch of Ford engineers, the Ford engineers were telling me, oh, that'll never work. You can't do that. And I would basically, in a nice, polite way, say, just watch me. And then it turned out, well, it worked only because you changed this parameter and you changed this parameter and you changed this parameter. Well, there was no rules that said I couldn't change some of the dynamics and the parameters that we were doing to get it to work. So a lot of times I would find that the entrepreneurial spirit, you put yourself in tunnels that you don't need to be put into. And I think understanding that and taking a step back from time to time will give you a much better aspect of going, okay, why is it that I have to drive on the right side of the road? Why can't I drive in the middle or on the left side or whatever, or upside down?
Yeah, right.
And those are the type of exercises that from time to time I think you need to kind of re-examine so that you understand where you're trying to get to.
I saw this great interview with Paul McCartney recently. A sound engineer was interviewing him, and he said to McCartney, like, in Obladi Oblada, nobody had ever done that. It's not possible in music to do that. Like, how did you think of that? And he said, well, we didn't know how to read music, so we didn't know it was impossible.
That's a good point. Sometimes being ignorant is actually much more to your advantage.
It would be very easy for you to say to yourself, well, they're Ford engineers. I mean, they have to know what they're talking about. And somehow you are able to transcend those thoughts that a lot of people have.
From an automotive standpoint, that's where my racing background and competing at the highest levels and all of that really, I think, has helped a lot in the development of the vehicles. I look at our competitors today, and a lot of them are hiring race car drivers to do the vehicle dynamic. I don't need to do that. I already know what it's supposed to feel like. I already know what it's going to do. And that, I find, gives us a very competitive advantage.
And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, like all these trials and tribulations and the engine not working and the car and this and that. Like it turned around to teach you the things that you needed to be successful.
Yeah, then that's, again, the one thing I would say is failure makes you better.
Yeah.
And everyone, whether it's Henry Ford or Walt Disney, have all failed multiple times.
Yeah.
Not your first time, and then all of that is that I think, you know, if it doesn't kill you, you will learn.
And it's easy to say, and I know that just about any entrepreneur would agree with that statement. Like, failure is good. It teaches you how to learn. Fail fast, fail often. But in the moment that it's time to fail, in the moment where failure is happening to you, there is an emotional tsunami that you get where all you can think of is, I just want to feel better. I don't want to feel this way. It's like when I went skydiving for the first time, approaching that door, all I could think of was like, I just want to stay in the airplane, you know, and I did jump, but my feelings were telling me, don't jump out of the plane. So you have to supersede your own good sense. You have to allow yourself to fail when everything inside of you is saying, don't do it.
Yes, I agree 100% with that.
I mean, now at this point, you failed enough where it's not a big deal. But how did you, at the very beginning, continue to approach failure with determination?
I think that you really, a lot of times you do have to take a step back and kind of reassess and all of that. And it does not feel good. I mean, we are not talking about pleasant feelings and any of this.
Quite the opposite, though.
Yes, yeah. It's you feel very alone, without a doubt. But you sort of like a phoenix. You kind of look at the ashes and you just kind of pick up the good parts that you can actually regroup and realize that, oh, well, this was not as bad as it seemed. Because at the end of the day, it isn't as bad as it seemed.
You're 100% right. When I lost my business, it was holding on to this, I failed feeling. That when I let go of it, like magic started happening. I really admire and appreciate that statement, that it's not as bad as you think.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And the sun will still come up tomorrow, regardless of what happens now.
One of my other guests, Glenn Stearns, said, when I fail, I remind myself this isn't the end of my story. It's the middle. Right? And I'm about to have this amazing comeback. All right. And if I give up now, I won't have this cool story about, I lost everything. And then this happened and I came back.
Actually, and we do a very similar thing. I go, all that was just one of the chapters. And actually, some of the chapters will be more interesting reading than the other ones. It's just a chapter.
Why do you think you can do this and most people can't?
I have a lot of tenacity and really look at where I want to end up or what I want to do in life on it, to where, the little failures are not that big.
Well, then let's talk about a big failure where you had a plant in China and China
took the plant. They do what they call nationalizing it, which is essentially stealing it and claiming it's now theirs. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. So this is more than somebody losing your luggage or somebody taking something that you treasure. This is a factory that is an essential part of the operation of your company, and a government says, this is now ours.
This
And he laughs.
this will be a very interesting chapter in the book. Okay, so back in 2016, we were visited by the Chinese government. They wanted to start an automobile manufacturing company. They were willing to supply the land and the finances to make it happen. The Chinese government had 1/3 ownership of this whole facility. And I will say that it was large scale. It was 850 acres. I had never built a fully robotic company, but this was the first time that we had the opportunity to actually do this, because they were looking at building mainstream vehicles. So I designed a ground-up SUV in 3 levels, in gasoline, hybrid, and electric. And we then had to come out with a supercar that they wanted to have as a halo, a little bit quicker to market. And this facility could build at peak capacity 500,000 vehicles per year.
Wow.
As we get ready to launch, they decided that they would take over the plant completely. And they did it just like the movies. They cut off the water supply, they cut off the electric, and they put in security. Anyone that resisted was arrested on the spot and put in the jail, and literally took complete control, all of the IP and 100% of it, while all management was gone and they couldn't get back in because of the coronavirus lockdown.
So what do you do?
So we are in the argument now. I've had to go and utilize the U.S. Congress. Our congressman has helped us. We are in the midst of trying to resolve it in some level of diplomatic aspect of it. I'm not sure how it will turn out, but I look at it as a very painful but a very important learning experience that I have taken, because I did design some pretty cool cars. I know how to put in a full 500,000 vehicle automated, fully modern plant to build, and understand a lot more about the Chinese culture.
Yeah. Can this wreck you? Can this take you down?
No, if I let it, it could.
Right. I mean, but like financially, couldn't it topple you?
Well, between China, between the coronavirus and the computer chip, I think we are one of the poster child for the adverse effect that you could have as a company and still maintain any kind of sanity and all of that as we operate currently. And so I look at it, again, the failures and the experience that life has taught me. I have put together a recapitalization that we are doing that we will go live with here next month. And so we are looking at the world is moving forward. You will see some new product from us on our new Bronco that you'll see here by the end of the year. You're going to see us get back into production on our S1 Supercar.
Nice.
And you also will see a new all-electric Supercar, because that's where life is going.
And for my audience who's not aware of the chip problem, that's the fact that it's nearly impossible to get chips for cars now.
Yes. And now that has become a little bit of an Achilles heel that we need to start paying attention and recognize, wow, that wasn't some of the decisions done in the late 80s and 90s and 2000s probably are coming back to haunt us a little bit.
I see a lot of people use the word fair. I don't like that. That's not fair. And clearly, this problem with China wasn't fair. And what I've recognized is that fair doesn't exist in nature. If a bird builds a nest and another bird takes it, the bird's like, well, I guess I got to go build another nest now. Fair is a very human concept. It's really rare when things turn out fair. Like, wow, that's kind of cool. It was fair. How do you not get lost in, like, this is just not fair?
The big stuff I get over better. It's the little stuff.
Really?
That because some of the stuff that's under your direct control,
Yeah.
that's the stuff I get mad and irritated. But on the big stuff, I'm able to maybe take a deep breath and recognize, okay, we will figure out how to move on it. Focus on the stuff you can control, not the stuff that you can't control. And I will tell you, a lot of that is where you do have to focus on.
It's hard in the moment,
Yeah.
right? Like, don't get angry at spilled milk. Well, when you actually spill the milk or lose a factory, it's hard to manage those emotions. And I'm just like drawing this line from, you're still this kid in the garage with the engine that seized up in 3 seconds. You're still like, damn it. All right, let's find out what went wrong.
That's it. It will only define you if you let it define you.
And that is tough. Did you plan on being rich?
That was the plan,
Uh-huh.
and it still is the plan. Okay? As you kind of go through life, you have to kind of define, well, what rich? Is that financial? Or is experience rich? Or is it accomplishment rich? And there's a lot of ways, I think, to look at that. But from a financial standpoint, it certainly is. It has been in the plan, and it still continues to be in the plan, and it continues to be a driving force, and it's still obtainable.
Yeah. When I hit $1 million, first of all, it was much different than I thought it would be. It was like, okay, I'm a millionaire. That's odd. And then I thought, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's nice to go to Target and get the more expensive one, but I'm so wrapped up in what I can create, like this podcast and the other things I'm bringing into the world. That's where my focus is now.
And I think any entrepreneurial, you have to kind of analyze yourself and go, what are the meaningful? I've been fortunate very much to have a very good wife in the respect that she's been able to go through all these ups and downs and everything and still have a positive smile. And there's been very much of the foundation that gives me the strength, if you will, to be able to actually go through this.
And it is clear to me that from your very beginnings, what you saw in your father and how he conducted himself in business and his determination and his focus. And the reason I'm saying that, Steve, is I don't want anybody to come away from this interview and think, well, he had these great parents. Well, he had this. It's your determination. It's your spark. It's your focus that is the biggest part of your success.
Yes, without a doubt. And pick which foxhole you want to get in and who you want in there with you is important.
God, that's so true. You had mentioned that Tesla isn't an electric car against your religion?
No, not at all.
Right.
What we're trying to do is build vehicles. Everyone's focused on the electric cars.
Yeah.
But I'm actually looking beyond electric cars into what has happened with solar. And if we really want to think further out is, well, why can't the car just fly? So that is what is driving us today and is looking at in the future. So
is this the future for Saleen? Is like, okay, we've done this, what else we can do? Is that where your head is?
Yeah. A lot of people ask me, well, what's your favorite vehicle? Well, it's the current one I'm working on.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a political answer, but it really is true. I don't have a lot of personal cars I keep in my collection, and I look at. I'm always interested in the next newest one. Is what probably drives me more than anything is the next newest technology. What's the next newest aspect of it? How can we make this better? That is where my focus has been since day one.
And it sounds like, what Project Molly was all about. Here's this idea. Let's see if we can make it happen.
Yeah, we should clarify that because she will kill me. Molly is my daughter, and she's very much involved in the business. So the fact that we did the code name Molly so nobody would know that we were working on America's Supercar on this is how that all came about.
What a lucky kid. It sounds like your favorite car is the one you haven't built yet.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
And that is it. I use things like companies like Blockbuster Video as a cautionary tale. Like Netflix tried to sell themselves to Blockbuster in the early days for like $5 million, like nothing. And Blockbuster was like, oh, no. Like, we rent videos and we make money off of late fees. Like that's our business model. And they went from being a $5 billion company to being bankrupt in 3 years because they weren't thinking of themselves as a entertainment delivery company. They were thinking of themselves as a DVD and videotape company.
Yeah, a physical product that will have its finite shelf life and not beyond that.
And it's like, what Apple did in the 80s. We're not a computer company anymore. We're a technology company. And that opens things up. It seems to me that Saleen isn't a car company. It's a transportation company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's one of our motive is we're transforming the transportation is one of our mottos.
There's a video that I watched. The announcer said, we don't do it because it's easy. We do it because it's hard. And I love that quote because I'm a NASA enthusiast. And of course, that's a utilization of Kennedy's quote.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Right? We choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
Yes.
And so what is it about doing hard things that appeals to you so much? Is it, can I do it?
From my standpoint, we are always trying to break the law of physics. The one thing I've challenged any new engineer that has worked for me, the first thing I want them to think about is how do we create perpetual motion? So that's part of, I think, just in our pursuit and all
it's your
of
culture,
those type of things.
right?
Yeah, yes, it very much is the culture.
Yeah. And that is allowing people to fail. I mean, you're literally setting them up for failure. Build me a perpetual motion, like impossible. But is in the pursuit of failure, is in the pursuit of the impossible that you find what is possible.
Yes.
And and looking over the course of your history, it's clear that's what you've done over and over and over again.
Yes, I would say so. That would be very appropriate.
And so, last question. What do you consider to be your personal superpowers in business and in life? Superman can bend steel. What is your bending steel?
Well, I would say I'm more of, instead of the bending, I would be more resilient, or the rubber man, to where nothing actually will end up sticking or I can mold around it or all of that. I would be more probably in stretching and being able to morph into a different aspect of it.
It's very much Taoism. There's a concept of Taoism called the uncarved block, whereas the block is perfect as it is. And that no matter what happens, there is perfection inside of it. And what I hear you saying is that these awful things happen, but there's some perfection there. There's growth, there's knowledge, there's learning. And is that something that you think you came into the world with or that you developed in some way?
I think part of it is the DNA that you're born with.
And you've really managed to not get too attached. Like if you can walk through this thing with your company in China, I could go on talking with you for hours, but I just thank you so much for being so generous with your time. What you've shared about entrepreneurialism, what it took for you, and just what it takes broadly overall to be successful is just so incredibly valuable. Because from the outside, it's like, oh, he got lucky. This happened. He had this. But inside of all these struggles is where you really excelled. And this not being attached, this, the rubber man, not letting things stick to you. The stories that you share, the triumphs, the successes, the failures, really helpful. And I thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure, and I've certainly enjoyed it as well.
I'm so glad.
Hey, one last thing. If you're feeling stuck in business life, wherever, download my book, Jumping the Gap, Kill Your Story and Take Action. In this book, you'll see how the stories that you tell yourself are stopping yourself from living your greatest life. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to this number, 213-409-8366. 213-409-8366, and text the word GAP. It's a short read, it's fun, it's easy, and if you hate reading like I do, you can grab the audiobook. It's at that same link. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to 213-409-8366. You'll love it. All right, that's it. Go out there and be badass today.